thank you for coming along to hear a borderline millennial chat about Gen Z booking trends. My name's Sam Weston, and I'm the marketing manager at 80 Days. We're a digital and creative agency that specializes in hospitality and travel. So just to jump in, we've been looking at some of our data to try and identify some of the trends and behaviors of Gen Z over the last couple of years and in 2022. And we'll be chatting about today just basically why Gen Z, why they should be on your radar, why they're important to hoteliers, who are they, just to give a bit of context, as well as looking at obviously some booking trends and how you might better market to this younger demographic. So first of all, why Gen Z? Well, we did a study in 2021 with our clients, and actually 20% of hoteliers reported that they had a younger customer base in 2021. So certainly an emerging trend during the last year. And that was something that they expected to continue into 22 as well. So what we wanted to try and understand using our data was, are we seeing that in booking data as well? Because we should be. They shouldn't hopefully all be booking via the OTAs or third parties. And it was certainly the case. And I'm aware that these are very small graphs. Don't worry, you don't have to see these. I'll summarize the results in a minute. But what we saw in the pandemic was an increasing amount of traffic, website traffic and transactions, the important bit, coming from that Gen Z demographic, that 18 to 24-year-old demographic. So whereas before the pandemic, it was around about the sort of 3.5, 4% mark of traffic and transactions, they're now accounting for anywhere up to sort of 13, 14% of traffic and transactions to a hotel website, and they're converting at a much higher level as well. So incredible growth in just quite a short space of time. But obviously we want to know, has that been maintained into 2022, or is it a kind of pandemic trend that's kind of going to peter away now? So just to bring it back a level and just talk about who are these Gen Zs, first of all, they are the digital natives. So they have grown up with the internet basically from day one. They didn't come out of the womb with a smartphone, but not far off. They are digital natives. They are the I generation, they're the internet generation, they're net gen, or the quite fun term for them is Zoomers as well. So baby boomers mixed with Gen Z. But essentially they're aged 10 to 25. They were born between 1997 and 2012, which makes you feel very, very old quite quickly. But of course, we're not going to talk about 10-year-olds booking hotel rooms, because not very many do. We're looking mainly at the 18 to 25-year-old demographic, because that's where hopefully there's some opportunity for hoteliers. So these are a generation that's never had to deal with VHS and Be Kind Rewind. They've never had to play Snake on their Nokia 3310, and they've never endured the dial-up tone, which we are all far too familiar with from dial-up internet. This is a generation that looks down, not up. And in fact, 79% of them say they can't physically live without their smartphones, such as their addiction to screens. Now, does anyone care to take a guess at how many hours per day a Gen Z spends on their smartphone? Any numbers? It's not quite 24 hours, but it isn't far off it. 10.6 hours per day, apparently, on average, on their smartphones. More than a full working day on their smartphones every single day. And actually, millennials, we're not much better. We're still around about 8 or 9 hours a day. So I think the overall message here is actually stop looking at our screens and start looking up at the world is a good start. And I realize the irony of that, telling you that whilst you're all looking at a screen. But they've kind of had these smartphones, this technology in their hands from a much younger age. So they got their first smartphones at age 12, rather than millennials, which have had them since 17. So right from the get-go, they've had more experience, more knowledge of technology and the internet. So by the time they reach 18, they're primed and ready to go to make bookings, hopefully, and there's no kind of resistance to that usage of technology. But the important bit is, are they using this knowledge? Are they using these skills to book travel? So looking at some Gen Z booking trends to try and answer that question, just to explain behind the data that we've kind of got to show you today, This is all data from Hotel Benchmark, which is a free benchmarking tool that allows hoteliers to put their marketing performance in context. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but basically all based around age demographic data from Google Analytics. And specifically, the 18 to 24-year-old demographic. Can't quite get to 18 to 25-year-old because Google is 18 to 24, but we still get a good picture. It's based on the data from nearly 200 hotels, and it's sampled data from around about a third of the traffic, because not every single transaction on Google will have age demographic attached to it, because it's based on your user behavior, your browser behavior. So it's Google's best guess that you are an 18 to 24-year-old, but Google's pretty good at this because they've been doing it a while. So it's a really good trend indicator and hopefully gives you some insight into performance for your properties. So looking at traffic, first of all, website traffic. So similar to the chart we looked at earlier, this is looking at the percentage of total traffic by age demographic over the last 4 years, 2022 year to date up till August. And what we can see is quite clearly that age demographic 18 to 24-year-olds, those Gen Zs, are growing pretty consistently. And although it's flattened a little bit in 22, we've still obviously got the rest of the year to go. And I would expect it would probably be at least the same, if not a little bit higher than 2021 by the end of the year. And it certainly isn't reversing. We're not seeing that now that the pandemic is perhaps easing and travel is becoming a little bit easier, that Gen Zs are no longer visiting hotel websites. In fact, it's actually being maintained. And in a lot of respects, this is about Gen Z, so I'm not going to labor on the other demographics too much, but you can see that some of the younger millennials are kind of petering away a little bit, balanced by the sort of older millennials, that 35 to 40-year-old demographic. And some of the other demographics that we saw really spiked during the pandemic, so the 65 plus, they were getting their vaccines first, so they were a bit more confident to travel quicker, perhaps, was our assumption. They're starting to fall away just a little bit now that we're into 22. So to summarize really quickly, Gen Z pre-pandemic, 4.5% of total website traffic. Gen Z now, 13%. So three times as much traffic contributed to a hotel website now than before the pandemic. So very much a growing demographic, a growing market, very much sustained growth as well. Of course, the important bit is, it's all very well visiting a website, but are they actually booking? And the answer is, thankfully, yes, they are. In a similar fashion to what we saw with session data, with website traffic data, they are making those bookings as well. So they're accounting for 3 or 4 times as much bookings to a hotel website now than they were before the pandemic. And just to highlight as well, those other demographics you can see there, they are pretty much mirroring the website traffic data, with the notable kind of maybe exception of the 65 plus market, who are definitely transacting less than they were before the pandemic kind of started in earnest. So lots of bookings, lots of traffic, all good so far. And in terms of the website conversion rate, you know, in terms of how many people book on a hotel website, so 100 visitors, 1 booking, 1% conversion rate. What we're seeing with Gen Z, and in fact across all the demographics, is that they're all growing. So there's that real pent-up demand for travel, which is what we're all thankful for at the moment. But importantly, the Gen Z demographic's probably growing as fast as, well, definitely is, it's growing quicker than any other demographic out there. So what we're seeing is 0.46% conversion on a hotel website in 2019, 0.8% conversion in 2022 year to date. And as I say, it is the fastest growing demographic out of all of them when you compare 2022 to 2019. It's up 73% versus the next best, the kind of millennials, at 54%. So really good growth, really good sustained growth, and certainly a demographic you want to be paying attention to. So we've got this snapshot basically of the size of the kind of market for Gen Z in 22, 13% of traffic, 12.5% of transactions, and a 0.8% conversion rate for them in 2022. So we know what we're working with now. But how does that vary dependent on things like star rating? Are they more likely to book a 2-star or a 3-star, 4-star, 5-star hotel? Well, there's a lot of numbers on screen here, but I'll try and explain them in a quick way. If we look at the top performers in each as well, what we're seeing here basically is age demographic data, and again, traffic transactions as a percentage of total website traffic and transactions, and also the conversion rate again. And we see the top performers in each. Okay, that's not the, so there's a bit of an error with the charts here, but bear with me. So the top performing in each is actually obviously the 25 to 34-year-old demographic. You're seeing there that they're 29% and 30% of total traffic and transactions. And the conversion rate is the top in the, let's work with this quickly, 55 to 64-year-old demographic. So actually the more mature demographics are more likely to book a 2 or a 3-star hotel. This is the data for 2 or 3 stars. So that surprised me a little. I thought maybe the Gen Zs might be more price sensitive. They might book a 2 or 3-star hotel over a 4 or a 5-star hotel, but it doesn't appear to be the case. And in fact, Gen Z actually account for the 4th highest traffic, the 4th highest transactions, and the 3rd highest conversion rate. So very much middle ground in terms of all the demographics out there. When it comes to 4-star hotels, what we're seeing is a slightly different picture. So more traffic, more transactions from Gen Z, and a much higher conversion rate. And again, you can ignore that these aren't the top performers, but if we look at the top performers in each, we can see that the 25 to 34-year-old demographic has the top performing traffic, so the young millennials. And in terms of transactions, the millennials definitely lead the way in terms of 22% of all transactions on a hotel website for a 4-star property. That said, excuse me, that said, the Gen Zs are the 2nd highest conversions of all the different demographics for 4 stars. So they're more likely to book a 4-star than they are perhaps a 2 or a 3-star property. So they have a bit more disposable income than perhaps I gave them credit for at the start. And when we look at the 5-star market, we see that the top performers here, actually traffic again, Gen Z are still taking a bigger slice of the traffic than 2 and 3-star and 4-star properties, 14% of total traffic, but not as much transactions. And in terms of conversion rate, they're very much at the lower end for conversions. So they are looking at 5 stars. They want, they're window shopping 5-star hotels, but they're not necessarily always booking 5-star hotels, although they are still making those transactions, just not to the same level as 2 and 3 and 4-star properties. What we are seeing, obviously, is that the sweet spot for this for 5-star properties is the 25 to the 44-year-old demographic. That's very much where the bulk of the traffic and transactions are coming from. So Gen Z, a bit lower down in this one, 4th highest traffic, 4th highest conversions, and the 5th highest conversion rate. Or if you're pessimistic, the 2nd lowest conversion rate out of all the demographics there. So if we look at that all summed up to try and make it a bit easier to kind of comprehend, we can see that traffic and transaction-wise, that 4-star market does seem to be the sweet spot at the moment for the Gen Zs, and certainly they're perhaps more likely to convert for a 4-star property. And they definitely seem to be a little bit less price sensitive than perhaps we first thought. And although they actually do account for a higher percentage of traffic to 5-star properties than the more mature demographics, the 45 to 54-year-olds and the 65 plus, they're not converting to the same level at the moment. So for any 5-star properties out there, I wouldn't all of a sudden chuck all of your marketing budget to try and target Gen Zs, but you do want to start bringing them into the fold and making them aware of your product so that when they get that little bit older and ready to book, they'll obviously think of you. So again, how does it vary by device? We've talked about how they spend 10.6 hours a day on smartphones. Are they actually spending that time booking hotels, looking at travel? So when we look at website traffic by device, we see that they spend 57% of their traffic comes from desktop devices. And when I say desktop devices, I don't mean horrible old clunky desktop computers sat on a desk. These include things like laptops and MacBooks and all the gadgets that they have to hand at the moment. 42% of the time of traffic is coming from mobile and 1% from tablet. So tablet is very much not on their radar. You can see there, though, that tablet does increase as you go down that age demographic, and that's very true of what I've seen with my parents. They are using their tablets much more than they're using their smartphones or their laptops. And when you look at mobile, it kind of surprised me that actually the Gen Zs aren't using it as much as they are using desktops, but then also they're always on a MacBook, they're always on a laptop, so it doesn't necessarily surprise me too much. Millennials are a little bit more on their mobiles than the Gen Zs. themselves. When we look at transactions, again, the important bit, we can see that really the majority of transactions still come from desktop, which is not a major surprise. We certainly have seen significant growth on mobile transactions during the pandemic, but it still represents a much lower percentage overall when you compare it to desktop and tablet. What you can see is there, though, that the younger demographics are more likely to book on mobile and transact on mobile. And again, that tablet trend, as you go down the demographics, more likely to get more transactions from a more mature demographic. The important bit is that Gen Z are the most likely to convert on mobile. So if you can get them to close TikTok for a minute and come to your hotel website and actually engage and look at your offering, they are more likely to convert than the more mature demographics out there by quite some way. So it's definitely, it's not that they're not using their smartphones to visit hotel websites. It's just that we need to attract them basically from where they are now. And if we look at it by channel as well, and by channel I mean things like organic, organic search engine traffic versus PPC traffic. What we can see here is that, these are working, that's good. The top performing organic traffic is actually within that Gen Z demographic. So 41% of all traffic to a hotel website is coming from organic search for Gen Zs. And 40% of, 39.7% of transactions are also coming from Gen Z. And you can see there that those younger demographics seem to be using organic search engine traffic much more than sort of the more mature demographics. So it certainly would suggest that if you want to attract a younger demographic, it's worth investing in search engine optimization on your website. I would say that because that's a service that 80 Days offers, but it's borne out in the data. And PPC as well is very much a kind of mixed bag, I would say. The highest volume of sessions actually is from the more mature demographic, and my only kind of maybe explanation for that is that there's perhaps less of an understanding that it's a paid-for advert at the top and they just click it anyway, versus maybe the more skeptical younger demographics that realize it's paid for, it's being promoted to you. That said, they're not that skeptical because they're booking in their volumes and actually account for the highest percentage of traffic, transactions to hotel websites, and they're the most likely to convert as well. So takeaway today is perhaps experiment with your PPC campaigns, try some tailored messaging to Gen Zs, to their needs, to their wants, to try and see if you can attract them to your website and obviously convert. Then we look at email and social media, and this is quite an interesting one in terms of session data. The more mature demographics seem to use email to visit your website more than the younger demographics. Transactionally, though, the younger demographics are transacting more on your website from email traffic, and they're converting higher as well. So again, it would suggest there's a real opportunity there to drive more traffic from Gen Zs and those younger demographics to your website using email marketing. And it really highlights the importance of this first-party data future as third-party data becomes extinct, and we really need to invest in our databases and capturing as much data and as much demographic data about your database and your CRM. When we look at social, we also see session data. It's a bit of a mixed bag with social. Oddly, the sessions are highest amongst the more sort of the middle ground, the middle demographics, not the youngest demographics, which can surprise me. But transactionally, they're highest in the more mature demographics. But again, the important stat I take away probably from here is that Gen Z and the younger demographics are more likely to convert from social media than the more mature demographics. So if you can get them to engage with your content on social media, they're more likely to convert when they land on your website. That's not to say that social media is not more about just engaging with your audiences. It's not all about transactions and driving revenue, but if you can, then they will convert. So that email point was a really interesting one. So I chatted to our friends at Foresight, who are downstairs at stand 1221, about open rates and click-through rates for Gen Zs as well. So this is some data they shared with us about the different demographics and how open rates and click-through rates vary. And actually what you can see there is that as you progress through the demographics, open rates get higher and click-through rates get higher. But what we've seen just before, obviously, is that if you can get them on your website, they're going to convert from an email campaign more than those mature demographics. So there's this real opportunity to try and maybe slice up your data and try and tailor your messaging within your email campaigns to try and attract those demographics, try and attract those Gen Zs to speak to their needs and wants. And again, like I say, it really highlights the importance of that database management. Now, this is a slide that I took from a report that we pulled together looking at the cost of living impacts on hotel booking trends. And it was quite kind of worrying because it basically shows the percentage of traffic from email and from social media for all hotels, 4-star and 5 stars, is decreasing throughout 2022. So that could be for two reasons. Seasonality, of course, more hotel bookings, more interest in travel at the start of the year. We all know that generally tends to be the case, even during a pandemic. Or it could be that we're maybe not posting as much, we're maybe not emailing them as much as we perhaps should be. And what we found during the pandemic and what we would kind of reiterate today is that during the height of the pandemic in spring 2020, those hotels that kind of stopped marketing, that kind of went quite quiet, their traffic to their website dropped by 84%. Those hotels that continued to engage through email marketing, through social media, they maintained their marketing messaging, their traffic actually dropped by between 40 and 55%. And it seems very strange to talk about a drop of traffic of 40 to 55% being positive, but it's certainly a lot better than 84%. So the real message there is just keep communicating, even through difficult times, cost of living crisis, rising costs all over the place, through everything that's going on in the marketplace at the moment, currency conversions and the like. Keep that messaging up, keep communicating with your audiences through your own channels. So those are the booking trends. So how do we kind of market to this generation, this younger generation, and keep them engaged? Well, first and foremost, it's important to acknowledge that it's quite difficult because it's, as kind of mature marketers, this is a much younger demographic. This is people born in 2012 or 1997, so it's a challenge. And what I would say is, and it's perhaps the most obvious stat you'll see today, you need to speak to their needs and their wants. You need to understand what they actually want from your hotel, what they want from travel, holistically. Don't make assumptions. Don't try and be cool. Just try and get as much as you can from your CRM and all the demographic data you might have in there. What offers have they engaged with in the past? What resonates best with them? And also social media has got tons of demographic reporting in there as well. So how are they engaging with your content now, and what can you maybe put out in the future that's going to help drive engagement, drive traffic to your site? And it basically all starts with knowing your audience. And this whole idea of this new frontier, it's a very dramatic sounding way to describe this kind of cookieless future, this kind of death of third-party cookies and this emergence of the importance. I mean, it's always been important, but now more so than ever, first-party data, your own data, the data that you're capturing through your website, through your front of house. Really, it is all about kind of auditing your data collection and making sure it's all up to scratch and you're getting as much from it as possible. Have to put it in there. You have to ensure GDPR compliancy, right? I mean, it's something we all worried about a few years ago, and perhaps it's been put on the back burner a little bit now that we've got our data offices in place, etc. But if you're capturing lots of data and it's not GDPR compliant, you can't really use it. So it's really important to just revisit that and just double check that you're capturing data in a compliant way. Audit your systems as well. I mean, it's a boring one, but it'll save you a lot of time in the long run. Does your website push the data directly into your CRM? If it doesn't, and you're having to kind of manually do it, that's not great when you start looking at the volumes of data that you're going to need to kind of start looking at in 2023. And planning ahead, I mean, it's an obvious one, but if you want to segment your data by age demographic in 2023, and you don't currently have age demographic data in your database, start looking to add that in now. And I'm not saying add tons of fields onto your email sign-ups on your hotel websites, because we all know that people will just not engage with that. They'll switch off quite quickly. Still capture name, first name, email address, whatever, but follow up with an email from your CRM to complete your profile. offer them a value exchange, so give them a 10% off their next break, or maybe a chance to win a prize. And set up Google Analytics for yesterday. It's really important. It basically will help you with this kind of first-party feature, and this death of third-party cookies. So it'll fill in a lot of the gaps with machine learning and fancy algorithms that Google have developed to try and basically model different conversions, which, like I say, for Gen Z and all demographics, is going to be vital. Don't be put off by Google Analytics 4 and all the nerdy terminology and all the geekiness of it. It's actually very similar to Universal Analytics. It's just it's capturing data in a different way, and there's perhaps some different terminology. But at the end of the day, we're still tracking users as best we can. And if you can scan this QR code here to get a hotelier's guide, a plain English hotelier's guide to GA4, or visit the 80 Days blog. And then in terms of sustainability as well, very important to all age demographics, but especially to Gen Zs. 71% of Gen Zs find their future to be worrisome or frightening. I think right now 100% of all of us would probably say that we find our future worrisome or frightening. But this is obviously in the context of sustainability, this study that Ulster University did. So they really care, more so than probably any other demographic, about the future and the environment and the world that they're growing into. But like I say, it's really a kind of universal thing that sustainability is of growing importance to all travelers, because 81% of them would rate it as being important to them, and 70% of them are finding it harder to travel more sustainably and to make those decisions on where to go. So things like sustainability accreditation, these badges of honor that you might want to sort of consider, can be really helpful in your marketing. And you don't want to be too preachy. Obviously, you're not going to go out there and say you're the most sustainable hotel in the world. That's maybe not the best way to do it, but you want to make sure that these younger demographics know that you're making an effort to become a more sustainable business. And there's various different initiatives like Booking.com, TripAdvisor, Google, that you can use to kind of make that statement. And it really helps you stand out. So you might not necessarily be able to see it here, but that top result there for Waldorf in London is an eco-certified hotel. It's a lot more visible when you're on your laptop. But if you imagine like searching through these endless search results of hotels and rates being fairly similar as they usually are for properties in a 4-star demographic, a 4-star audience, that eco-certified might be the difference between getting the conversion and not. So it's definitely worthwhile putting that on your hotels if you can. And it's pretty straightforward to do it. It's not that difficult. So it's really just about better management of your Google listings and putting all the data that you have and all of the initiatives that you're kind of undertaking into Google so that they know that you are actually an eco-certified hotel. And then when it comes to visuals, Gen Z, they're visual thinkers. They're probably more so than any other demographic to care about photography, videography. And 81% of them say that Instagram and YouTube are their preferred social networks, so two very visual platforms, obviously. You'll be wondering, where's TikTok? Because I was as well. 35% of them actually want you to be on TikTok, or more brands to be on TikTok than before. And that doesn't mean you have to dust off your dancing shoes and start jumping onto the latest trends, unless you've got great moves, in which case, go for it. But it does mean you should start to think about how you can kind of adapt your brand to work on TikTok. And it doesn't have to be for driving bookings, right? You could use it for recruitment, because we all know that's a challenge as well at the moment. So if you want to encourage Gen Zs, millennials, to start a career in hospitality, what better way than perhaps a behind-the-scenes at your hotel, a curated behind-the-scenes at your hotel, show them the good bits, of working in hospitality to try and drive interest in a career within the industry. And although we bang on about the importance of short-form video, it's really important to think about that long-term video as well, that long-form video, as well. Because actually a study by Google suggested that they'll discover video on short-form content like TikTok, like Instagram Reels, but 59% of them will actually go on to actually source a longer form of that video content. So an example might be sustainability again. If you have sustainable initiatives, do a 15, 20-second highlight of what you're doing, and then expand that out to a 3-minute video that you might have on YouTube that gives that added depth and gives them some guidance about how they can be more sustainable in their day-to-day lives as well. And then we can talk about influence and loyalty. You know, they're not the most loyal bunch, Gen Zs. They've got the freedom of choice. They know everywhere they need to go to get the best price, to get the different options. They're much more tech savvy. However, they still care what other people think. They're very not easily influenced, but they are very influenced by others. So 82% of them would purchase after reading another review on social media. So this comes back to the age-old manage your reputation online, right? TripAdvisor reviews, Google reviews, but especially social media as well. Don't leave negative comments unresponded. Make sure you're acknowledging them just as much as you would celebrate a positive comment. And 84% of them would make a purchase after someone they trust has recommended it as well. So think about how that maybe factors into things like your loyalty schemes. You know, historically, you might have a scheme that doesn't really factor this in, but could you have some kind of like refer a friend scheme, or, you know, something that basically allows a younger demographic to refer one of their pals? And as Steve from Inspire Loyalty attests to as well, they expect these instant and dynamic rewards. They really are all about the now, grab and go culture. So think about that within your loyalty schemes and how you kind of plan that out. Not to the detriment of other demographics. We can't show preference to the younger demographics, but think about how you might be able to give just little drip feed, little rewards as they go along. And then it wouldn't be right of me to not mention Metaverse and NFTs, two very nerdy buzzwords that are in the industry at the moment. 60% of Metaverse users are Gen Z, so this is where they are living. They're living in a virtual world. So if you want to reach them now, then Metaverse might be an option. I'm not saying jump out and build a digital twin of your hotel in the Metaverse right now, because the costs involved and the returns you might see might not be there just yet. But Facebook didn't rebrand to Meta for no reason. There's certainly something in this Metaverse lark. And 64% of all consumers, so not just Gen Zs, have actually purchased a virtual product or enjoyed a virtual experience in the last 12 months. So it's becoming more mainstream. More and more VR headsets are out there in the world. People are starting to sort of explore this virtual world. And hoteliers are starting to explore it too. Citizen M is a great example. Obviously, they're probably ripe for a younger demographic anyway, so it makes sense for them to be one of the first kind of first to explore this space. They're doing it in kind of an interesting way, using things like NFTs to help shape their actual real world expansion and real world growth as well. So, like I say, don't jump out there and immediately go into the metaverse. That's probably not the right thing to do. But start asking yourself questions about how you might want to engage with this virtual world. Sit down with your team and sort of maybe ask yourself these 6 questions about how and why you might want to have a representation there. And one of the most important points I would say there is really think about it, especially for luxury brands. How are you going to maintain that brand consistency and uphold your brand values in a virtual world? You don't want it to cheapen your brand, of course. And again, it's a huge subject, and we've tried to make it a bit simpler. And again, trying to de-jargonize it and trying to take some of the horrible acronyms out of it. With our Hoteliers Guides and Metaverse, which you can find on our blog by scanning that QR code or visiting at-days.com. So that was a whistle-stop tour through Gen Z. Most of the data, or a lot of the data you saw there, came from Hotel Benchmark, like I say, which is a free benchmarking tool that hoteliers can sign up for that really helps put your marketing performance into context and helps you compare your digital marketing against competitors.